Oh, baby, do we have ourselves a discussion. How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here. It is December 5th, 2025, and as we've done every single day throughout the course of the offseason, we're back at it breaking down the latest news and rumblings. But this is without a doubt one of, if not the most jam-packed video we have done in a hot minute, because we're going to be breaking down 6+ different players for each and every one of you today, from Tarik Skubal to Kyle Schwarber to Ranger Suarez to Framber, Valdez to Tatsuya, Imai to Michael Cain, and so much more. Why? Because all key reports have dropped as of this morning, if not at latest last night, connecting the Mets to varying degrees to these players, including having a lot of interest in guys like Tatsuya, Imai, and Michael Cain. How the Mets not only love Kyle Schwarber, but there's a world where they could pry him away from Philadelphia and the Southpaw and Ranger Suarez. We're going to get into Tarik Skubal's market right now, how things are looking better than worse for his potential to being traded this offseason, and so much more Mets land. So sit back, relax, and get yourself ready for the ride, which is our latest breakdown, a jam-packed breakdown here in WardyNYM. All I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe button on your way in. Thank you guys again for 36,000 subscribers. Help us get to our next short-term goal of 40K, because folks, as we do after every new 1,000 subscriber milestone on the platform, we give away a brand new Mets jersey of whatever player you want on the roster to one lucky subscriber, and that giveaway will in fact transpire Monday, December 8th, day 2 or day 1 of winter meetings, however you'd like to label it there, during our live stream. So make sure to check it out. Be involved for your chance to win that new jersey, guys. Also, shout out to SeatGeek that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Use my promo code WARDY10, that is WARDY10, link down below in the description, so that way you too get 10% off whatever you need in the ticketing space for your next purchase, whether that is NHL tickets, NFL tickets, NBA tickets, concerts, comedies, you name it. SeatGeek, as always, has you covered for all things on the ticketing front. WARDY10, link down below for 10% off your next ticket purchase. Now, folks, let's go right ahead and deep dive this one. We got a lot to talk about. You know how yesterday we talked about this man right here, and Byron Buxton and Joe Ryan? Please make sure to check out that video in case you haven't already, as the Mets are involved in, yes, both those players' markets. Again, the Mets and David Stearns are making sure that no stone goes unturned in their pursuit of trying to maximize their team for the better for next season. In order to do so, you have to make sure that you weigh all options, plan A all the way to Z. That way, if say plan A or B doesn't work, C hopefully works. Or if say plan C and D didn't work, is that because plans A and B worked? Again, to be determined, but the point is the Mets are very busy right now, like many other teams in Major League Baseball. And as we guys can first defer to is an article that came out as of this morning from Jeff Passan of ESPN. The winter meetings start this weekend, and there will be action. The latest on the free agent and trade landscapes from me and Buster only, who I have choice words to say about, but that's a discussion for another day, including who's likely to sign, who's on the trade market, and which teams will be most active. And in this piece, as we know, as a surprise absolutely nobody, the Mets have been heavily involved in the market of one Kyle Schwarber. We actually broke it down the platform just a couple days ago, as a matter of fact, on the Mets are officially targeting Schwarber, and they obviously would have loved Kyle, but in a world where you land Kyle Schwarber, who's entering his age 33 season, seeking north of a 5-year contract, which I think is palatable because he's a DH. I think he's going to age like a fine wine if he's fully DHing through and through until his late 30s. And I'm really not going to deviate away from that mentality, barring changes. But the point stands, if you bring in someone like Schwarber, you more than likely can't bring Alonso back as someone who would likely need more DH reps than ever before in his career to justify bringing the polar bear back, because we know how defensively not so sound he is at first base. But in this piece in particular, there's one key column I would like to highlight on the front of Kyle Schwarber, and I want you guys to share your opinions about this in the comments down below. We know the Mets have been plenty involved in Schwarber's market, but it continues here from Buster Only when breaking down what else has he been hearing this offseason, and he does in fact state the following. Only the juiciest rumor I heard this week was the notion that the Mets could push the Phillies for Schwarber, and there are a lot of reasons this could make sense. Beyond Schwarber's power and on-base capability, can you imagine pitchers working to get through Schwarber and Soto in the same inning? He is known as someone who works to pull players together, and hell, even if the Mets don't believe they can beat the Phillies in the bidding for the slugger, they could push Philadelphia's cost by being involved, as the Braves did with Aaron Nola 2 winters ago. And mind you, that Aaron Nola contract has been aging like absolute milk since then. A slam dunk by the Braves to push those dollars up and make sure the Phillies had to spend a Cain's ransom for an otherwise fairly mid pitcher. And that's speaking lightly, knowing how much struggles Nola had this past year. He needs a big rebound 2026 season, especially with Zach Wheeler still out with injury. But the point stands, okay, The Mets, we know they like Schwarber a lot, but the idea that they could really be going after Schwarber here to the point of prying him away from Philadelphia is what makes this fascinating. And as only states, and I agree with them for a change, because that doesn't happen very often if you guys know the history on the platform, it's that it's true. If the Mets have a bidding war happen for Schwarber and they walk in the end because they say, you know what, we're getting to a point where we might as well just make sure we're bringing Alonso back between the two here, then let's just go ahead and make sure the Phillies have to spend a king's ransom for Schwarber, maybe more than they otherwise wanted to. And that's ideal, because let's call it how it is, everybody. As great as Kyle Schwarber is, there are justified reasons, in my opinion, and the opinions of many, as to why he isn't as logical to return the Philadelphia Phillies as you may believe. And the simple answer behind this is simply because of the fact that what have the Philadelphia Phillies done with Kyle Schwarber as their star DH/corner outfielder, even though you don't want him in the outfield? And the answer is not a whole lot. They've had their deep playoff runs, but they have moved downward since making the World Series back a couple years ago and losing in 6 games against those Houston Astros. Since that point in time, every single year the Phillies have fallen shorter in their playoff pushes for the most part. After the World Series, they lost then in the NLCS to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Then after the Arizona Diamondbacks lost in the NLCS, they lost to the New York Mets that we saw in the NLDS. Now we see the Phillies this past year do absolutely nothing when it comes to postseason play yet again. Schwarber, as elite as he was very few and far in between in what you're getting. The offense collectively for the Phillies absolutely failed, and now you look at their core group between Schwarber, again, while he was under contract, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Nick Castellanos. What do these guys have in common? They're getting older. They're not getting any younger, and the Phillies have not been able to get over that hump with this core group. So common sense tells you that if the Phillies want to operate smartly, yes, you want to bring back your star slugger who's absolutely taking advantage of the batter's box there at the bank the way that Schwarber most certainly has each of the past 4+ years, but it's also to make a retool happen. Not a rebuild, but a retool where you change the faces of the organization a little bit. They would love to pry away guys like Nick Castellanos, to a degree Alec Boehm, to a lesser degree Bryson Stott, to a higher degree Brandon Marsh. These are all guys at the right price that they'd be more than happy to part with, especially if it could increase their pursuit and say a Kyle Tucker or a Cody Bellinger type, who we know reportedly they do in fact like quite a bit. And I'll be unfortunately not too happy if Cody Bellinger does in fact go to the Phillies, because he's a guy that I think makes a lot of sense for the New York Mets, given their outfield gap currently, and someone who could also give you first base reps, which could platoon him with Alonso from first base to DH. It makes a lot of sense. Maybe too much sense for the New York Mets. We'll just have to wait and see. But the point stands. The Mets love Schwarber, and what is being widely reported in his market now from a lot of people with credibility in the industry at the moment is that Schwarber's expected to sign leading to the winter meetings before Pete Alonso. So if that is going to be the case, the Mets have a big decision to make, and fast, because it's going to be one or the other, more than likely, unless the Mets surprise us all and say, you know what, we're bringing in Schwarber and we're going to commit to Alonso full-time at first base, which would be completely contradicting to what we have believed Stearns is planning to do, which is to help surefire this Mets defense and the infield and the outfield, etc. You can't do that if Alonso's playing 162 next year at the first base position. It just won't happen. But this is where things get all the more fascinating. If the Mets are as heavily involved in Schwarber's market that we know them to be right now, and they do in fact say sign Kyle Schwarber hypothetically in the end over the next couple days leading into winter meetings, whatever the case may be, then you kind of have your answer as to what the route is for Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. And what I'm about to say is something that Mets fans are not going to love to hear, but I need to be transparent. I would be lying to you if I didn't say that Pete Alonso really likes the idea of being a Philadelphia Philly should he not return to the New York Mets. Yes, you heard that correctly. I can tell you in confidence from everything that I know in the industry, Alonso does in fact like Philly. And there's valid reasons as to why he likes Philly. So let's get into those reasons while also amplifying the fact that yes, there is a world where we start 2026. Kyle Schwarber is the Mets star DH pairing with Soto for big lefty bats in this lineup. And Pete Alonso is the star replacement for Schwarber for the Philadelphia Phillies. So how could this be? Why would this be in the case of Alonso? Well, let's start with the batter's box, right? I think of that quote that Alonso stated an offseason ago, right before David Stearns and Steve Cohen came to terms and inked him to his latest contract. And it was the following. Alonso stated to the faces of Stearns and Cohen and everyone else in the company point blank, I am going to be a 500-plus home run hitter in my career. I'm going to be a Hall of Famer regardless as to if I'm in a Mets uniform or not. And that rings true a lot to me when I think of Alonso's fit with the Philadelphia Phillies, because we know the bank, of course, Citizens Bank Park, is one of the more homer-friendly ballparks in all Major League Baseball. Of course, Cincinnati has a greater idea as to what that's like, since he is the biggest batter's box in baseball, not named Colorado. And that, too, I'm sure is enticing for someone like Kyle Schwarber, who's a Ohio native, and the Reds do have a level of interest in bringing Schwarber in. But it would likely have to come at a lesser cost than any other team that's giving him a big market offer, because they're not a big market club. So for Schwarber, I'm sure what's best for him and his family right now is to maximize the dollars on what is likely the biggest and longest term contract he'll ever have in his career again, of north of 5 years, 100+ million, anywhere from $100 to $150 million. So expecting that to be in that range, that already feels like the Reds shouldn't be in this discussion. So that's where you focus more in the big markets. And that's why Schwarber, again, I think is far more realistic to land either back with the Phillies, with the Mets, or with the Red Sox than, say, landing in Cincy, barring changes. But for Alonso, one, he would thrive in that park for half the season. It would kill Mets fans, including myself, but there's no denying that he would be a feasible fit there. Secondly, he would also be a logical fit in the world where they wanted to platoon Bryce Harper and Pete Alonso from first base to DH. Makes a lot of sense. Bryce is not getting any younger. You want to maximize his health and his longevity. He's someone that we know, of course, is a better defender at first right now, you could argue, than Alonso, because he is more of a athletic player, you could say. Even though Alonso, he is athletic, he just has not been a good defensive first baseman. That's how it is. That's what we know. So the point stands. If the Mets do not prioritize Pete Alonso, but they look at Alonso and say, we're going to prioritize the other best slugger in the market over you, because that's how we feel about you, do not be shocked if Pete Alonso actually landed with a team like the Philadelphia Phillies in the end. Again, is it something that I want to see? No. Would it piss me the hell off? Yes, pardon my French. And would it live rent-free in my head, especially if Alonso has greater success with the Phillies at a younger age over, say, the next 4 or 5 years than what Schwarber would give the Mets? No doubt about it. But at the end of the day, I'm focused on what is ever best for the Mets organization moving forward. I do believe what's best is an Alonso reunion, and I believe that that is still going to happen until it doesn't happen at this point in time. But the point stands. If the Mets don't bring Alonso back, regardless as to where he goes, Schwarber is without a doubt the best consolation prize, the best fit for the organization. You could even argue a better fit for the team now than Alonso, for the sake of Schwarber will be solely your everyday DH, which means you can maximize a more defensively sound first baseman that maybe has some offensive upside. We think of guys like Ryan O'Hearn. We think of guys like Ryan Mountcastle. We also think of guys like Mr. Kazuma Akamoto, who's one of the most slept-on free agents coming from the MPB this year, who I personally love and I think would be a seamless fit there at first base. But the point still stands. Schwarber would be a tremendous pickup, but is he someone that you realistically want over Alonso? For me, it all comes down to overall team fit, what the Mets do outside of Schwarber, and how much maybe Alonso would have hindered their ability to really maximize the team defense to the liking of what David Stearns is looking for. I see both sides of the coin here, but simply put, if Alonso's a Philadelphia Philly next season, no matter what the Mets do, I'm more than likely going to be pissed off about it. And I know I'm just one of many Mets fans that'll fall in that category. So now, guys, let's go on from talking about not just Kyle Schwarber, but let's talk about his teammate. A lot of breakdown in this one today, everybody, like I said. So, you know how we just mentioned Schwarber, again, a top free agent from the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, he's not the only top free agent that we're going to break down in this one. We're also going to go ahead and break down the following, which is here. Okay. Mark Feinsand of MLB.com reports the following today. The Mets are in the mix for Ranger Suarez. A number of clubs have attached to Suarez in recent weeks, with sources tabbing the Astros, Cubs, and Orioles as the most serious threats to sign him away from the Phillies. The Mets and Tigers are also in the mix, per sources. Suarez, 30, of course, had a 3.2 ERA this past season with the Phillies. Now, let me start off by saying, is Suarez my favorite fit for starters the Mets can acquire? Far from it. If I'm being completely transparent, he's actually one of my least favorite, depending on what else the Mets do. Because if the Mets are determined to land 2 quality starters this offseason, meaning a trade for Kodai Senga is pretty much inevitable. And for those that are wondering, why would he trade Kodai Senga at a low point? I'm here to tell you Senga's trade value isn't nearly as low as you think it is, okay? Yes, he had a Jekyll and Hyde season this past year, but the teams are still going to look at that 3-year array. Yes, the expected numbers aren't that great, but they're going to bank on the fact that he still has ace upside and was looking dominant up until his injury in mid-June of last season. So Senga, what does he have that no other controllable starter that the Mets currently have on their roster provide? That is solid trade value, okay? Clay Holmes ain't going to give you as much trade value as Kodai Senga. David Pearson ain't going to give you as much trade value as Kodai Senga. Sean Manaea surely ain't going to do it. Then you look at the youngsters and Jonah Tom, Brandon Sproat, etc. That ain't going to happen. So the point stands. Kodai Senga is the most viable candidate for the Mets to go ahead and just trade away because they're going to get quality assets in return, and it'll actually open up the floodgates for their rotation flexibility. Because the Mets have 8 starters under contract right now that'll impact them to varying degrees next year. They have to make rotation room in order to upgrade the rotation. Am I one of those fans that wants Senga traded just for the sake of trading him? No, far from it. I do not fall in that category. But what I do fall in the category of is if the Mets are going to add 2 pitchers that have ace upside or close to this offseason, if one is trade, one is free agency, if both are free agency or both are trade, whatever the case may be, that is what justifies trading Senga. Now, if you add one truly ace caliber starter, but the other you're looking more of a guy that has a level of risk due to lack of innings, as well as someone who maybe has flashes of ace upside but is more of a 3 or 4, then you might not be as inclined to trade Kodai Senga unless the Mets are really adamant on just saying that ship has sailed. We're fed up with him. He has been incompetent for 2 years in a row, and we need him to be our guy, and we would like a fresh start, an even slate. If that is the case, then Senga, good luck in your future endeavors wherever it's going to be, because it ain't going to be with the New York Mets as much as you want to be. I know you're very prideful, Senga, that we talked about a couple days ago. I know you don't want to leave the Mets, but you don't have say over this, other than the fact that you can veto trades to 10 different teams out of the 30-plus in baseball currently. So, Suarez, let's talk about him. Let's talk about the pros and the cons. And let's first talk about the pros, because there are a lot of pros with Rainer Suarez. He has been steadily one of the more consistent southpaws that we have seen in the National League for a number of seasons now. He's been someone that we have rued to face against many of the times, especially in Philadelphia, because Suarez has diced up the Mets more times than not that I've seen. And in just under 160 innings this past season, he posted a very respectable 3.2 ERA. I love the expected numbers, so it tells you that even in a batter's box half the season, he had good defensive around him for the most part. A 3.15 expected ERA, a 3.3 SI ERA, a 1.2 whip, a 3.2 FIP, and 151 strikeouts this past season. So there are enticing things about Suarez. He's only entering his age 31 season. He ain't going to get a 7-year contract. He'll more than likely fall, if I had to guess, in a contract similar in fashion to, say, Sean Manaea, but maybe instead of 3 years, $75 million, he gets at least a 4 or 5-year contract at well over $100 million. I think that's reasonable for someone like Rainer Suarez. He's kind of middle of the pack in the sense that he's not as good as Framber Valdez. And what I mean by that is Valdez gives you more innings, and we're going to get to Valdez in this one, so I won't go on too much of a tangent. But Valdez gives you more innings. He is the clearer upgrade between the two, even with him being north of 3 years older than Suarez. Suarez is not overly old. He ain't going to cost you as long-term of a deal as maybe some other starters will, and that is appealing for the New York Mets. Now let's get into what's not appealing about Rainer Suarez, okay? We're actually going to pair with both good and bad things here. So, as you guys can see from Ranger Suarez's Baseball Savant page, a lot to like, actually a lot to love if I'm being transparent. 90th percentile in pitcher run value, 60th in fastball run value. Mind you, this is out of a grading scale out of 100 per Baseball Savant. So if you're at 100, you're elite. If you're at 0, you're the worst in baseball. 87th in breaking run value, 90th in off-speed run value, 84th in expected ERA, 70th in expected batting average, 95th in average exit velocity. So no one, and I literally mean no one, is hitting Ranger Suarez hard. That's what's most impressive about Suarez for someone who does not throw hard, and we'll get to that. Chase percentage, 78th percentile. K percentage, 55th. Whip percentage, a little bit below league average, 24th percentile. 86th in walk percentage, 89th in barrel percentage, 98th in hard hit percentage. No one, as I mentioned, is hitting this man hard at all. 76th in ground ball percentage, and 29th in extension, because he doesn't have much of an extension for his release point. His frame at 6'1", a little over 200 pounds, like around 220. But You see the arsenal with the sinker, and the Mets love his arsenal. He's got the kitchen sink. The sinker at 29% of the arsenal at 90 plus miles per hour. The changeup at 19% of the arsenal at right around 80 miles per hour. The cutter at 17% of the arsenal at right around 86 miles per hour. The curveball at 16% of the arsenal at 74 miles per hour. The four seam, 15% of the arsenal, 91 miles per hour. And the slider at 4% of the arsenal, 80 miles per hour. Not bad at all. Here's what's bad. See that 7th percentile in fastball velocity? That's a problem. Because Ranger Suarez, if we look back to the last season, he put up yearly similar numbers on the Baseball Savant page. We have to go all the way back to 2021. See how these numbers aren't too far off, and you could even argue that some are better from this past season, which all the credit in the world to Ranger Suarez and the Phillies pitching lab to maximize his ability with the kitchen sink of an arsenal and someone who, of course, is going to induce a lot of ground ball outs. That's why he had a 97th percentile in ground ball rate that season in particular. But even then, he was just below league average 4 years ago that we saw in fastball velocity, sitting 93. Now, we see Ranger Suarez sitting 90, not even 91 comfortably on his average fastball. That is the biggest recipe for failure on a fairly long-term deal imaginable. That is the biggest asterisk and red flag with Ranger Suarez when looking at his makeup. He doesn't throw hard. So how much longer is he expected to have this continued success at the rate he has been doing before he starts to fall off a cliff? Secondly, how much can the Mets and, of course, Justin Willard, the newly appointed pitching coach, and Eric Yeagers do a great job and gain the best out of Ranger on, say, a north of a 4 or 5 year contract? I think the Mets could maximize his abilities greatly, just like the Phillies did. I think he would do unbelievably well in a pitcher's park half the year at Citi Field, the way that that's quite the opposite from the bank in Philadelphia. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for this team. That's why they're in the mix. But truthfully, I don't think the Mets are going to land Ranger Suarez in the end because I really don't think that he's the best profile for them, especially knowing that Suarez has a qualifying offer attached, so you have to give up draft pick and draft pick compensation. I don't think the Mets just want to do that for any starter this offseason. I think that they have select guys in mind that they would have more of an appetite to do so. Now, secondly, outside of the lack of velocity, which is a red flag with Suarez, as great as everything looks, again, he's such a hard pitcher to evaluate because he's had a lot of consistent success, but he's also been consistently incompetent in giving you innings. And as you guys can see, 157 this past season, 150 the year before that, 125 the year before that, 155 the year before that. In 2021, as I mentioned, was only just over 100 innings that season. He's never touched 170 innings in his career, and he's only getting older. That's a red flag for a Mets team that needs innings eaters more than anything in their rotation, which is exactly why, as much as Suarez is a feasible fit, I do not believe that he is the best fit for this team. If the Mets say landed Ranger Suarez after trading for an ace caliber starter, I can more than happily be comfortable having that on my palate. You know, if you had a Mets rotation next season of one of Skubal, Ryan, to a degree, Pablo Lopez, among others that you acquired, or Freddie Peralta, one of those four via trade, and then you sign Suarez, and then you have McLean, then you have Holmes, then you have Minaya, then you have at least one of, because I'd imagine you would have traded the other in a big trade, depending on what you're doing, of a Jonah Don or Brandon Sproat, and Christian Scott. There's a lot of options there. A lot of options to be far more excited about heading into next season than how things currently stand. And I didn't even mention David Peterson, mind you. So the point stands. The Mets have an abundance of options. They're involved in all these markets, but Ranger Suarez, I think, has some more pros and cons than maybe what the initial eye test would tell you. If you just look at his baseline numbers, you're going to be fairly encouraged because he has been very consistent the past number of years for the Phillies. And that's why it would not be the end of the world if the Mets signed him. But I see the rightful risk and concern with his fastball velocity in particular. Now, Suarez is not the only guy we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and let's actually completely pivot to the other guy that I want to talk about in this one of lefty starters, and that is Framber Valdez. In the same report that we saw today from Mark Feinsand of MLB, he did go on to break down how the Mets and the Orioles are favorites to land Valdez. Now, the reason why I'm not having that as the headline sticking piece of today's video is because we have already broken down extensively how Framber Valdez is, according to the Mets, from the Mets' point of view, they look like one of the best suitors for him as is. We had Hector Gomez, who, of course, is a fairly controversial reporter there at the DR because he swings and misses all the time on his reporting, but he did state that the Mets are the favorites to land Valdez north of a week ago at north of a $200 million contract. Now, I don't know if Valdez is going to get that many years. I would hope that there's an opportunity where Valdez could find himself more in the 4 or 5 year range, like a Suarez, and north of 7 for someone already entering his age 32 season. But This was reiterated, the exact same thing that we've heard from Jeff Passan, the exact same thing that we've heard from Ken Rosenthal. The common consensus in the media industry right now is that Framber Valdez's top suitors look like it's the Mets and it's the Orioles. Everyone else is kind of, fickle as to if that's actually going to materialize and turn into something. And apologies, everybody, as I'm just trying to focus my camera real quick, because it decided to go out of focus on me, but we're going to have to do this live in real time so I can fix it. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So, to talk more about Framber Valdez in particular, what is there to love about him? He is a lot of what Ranger Suarez isn't. He is a consistent workhorse. He gives you consistent innings. He had, in his age 31 season this past year, just under 200 innings. A 3.6 ERA, a 3.7 expected ERA, a K to walk ratio, which isn't fantastic, at right around an 8.8 K per nine to a 3.2 walks per nine. A 4-WAR season with this is a workhorse. This is a World Series champion. This is a Cy Young caliber pitcher, no doubt about it, when he is right. And he's the kind of guy that should be able to give you the health and the longevity, even entering his age 32 season barring changes, to look good from the start to the end of the season. We have seen nothing but very good reporting on Valdez. The only concern that we've had is, one, his potential attitude with what happened with this catcher this past year. And secondly, he's not getting any younger. So there's a lack of an appeal to want to land someone like him on north of a 7-year contract because he's already entering his age 32 season. Again, I see both sides of the coin here. But there is one key quote regarding Valdez in particular that I want to highlight for you guys. And it's here. And shout out to Daniel on X, who always has a screenshots these quotes from these articles to make it easier, even though I could just pull it up myself. You guys see here, this was from a piece from The Athletic as of yesterday. Few inside the Astros clubhouse have ever questioned Valdez's work ethic. Though his cross-up of catcher Cesar Salazar did create some uncomfortable moments, Valdez remained a well-liked teammate throughout his Houston Astros tenure. Astros manager Joe Espada often highlighted Valdez's extreme competitiveness as an endearing trait, even if it sometimes produced eyebrow-raising moments. The cross-up generated obvious headlines, but one month earlier, Valdez questioned Houston's outfield positioning during one of his starts. And I quote, "Valdez is someone I want to go on the battlefield with," Espada told Foul Territory last month. "I understand the reputation because of one event. People might reach conclusions from that. But I've been around him for 6-7 years. If I'm going into a dogfight, I want him to be right there next to me." And we've also heard key quotes stating how Valdez, according to Jeff Passan of ESPN, is, again, that guy that'll be your opening day starter and that guy who'll be towing the rubber for you for game one of postseason play. So not only does he have literally every accolade imaginable that you could look for as a Mets fan, but he is the most surefire, guaranteed thing and what you're getting. And that, too, is not an exaggeration. If you pull up Valdez's numbers here, shout at Fangraphs, of course, and also shout out to you guys for watching this video. This is a long one today. Like I said, we got 6+ players to break down. We're not going to go lightly with this one, but I'm doing it as fast as I can. If we pull up Framber Valdez and what he was able to do, not only this past season, but throughout his career for the Houston Astros, what you guys are going to notice is one thing that trumps all, and the one thing that really separates him from someone like Ranger Suarez. And no, I'm not even talking about, the ERA per se. I'm talking innings, guys. Innings. This is what you want. 192 this past year, right? Then we look 176 the year prior. 198, 201. I mean, we're looking at a 4-year stretch of averaging at least 185 to 190 innings from Framber Valdez. That is a needle mover. That is exactly what the Mets need for a rotation that was quite literally the most incompetent in baseball this past year on giving you at least 5+ innings. The Mets consistently sat for what felt like months on end at 4.2, 4.1, 5 innings. We finally got a 6th inning from David Peterson. Whoop-de-doo, Basil. Again, the point stands. You're not going to get much. And Valdez has consistently been dominant throughout his career. This is actually the worst expected ERA he's had just since 2023. So it's not like he's fallen off a complete clip when looking at all of his overall numbers. And he's consistently sat as a 4-WAR player each of the past 4+ seasons. And you want to know what happened throughout this stretch of time? He won a World Series. So there's a lot of things to be happy about if you're Framber Valdez. The same way that if you are now entering the market for Valdez, you see the pros, you see the cons, but what you see more than anything is the most surefire, guaranteed thing in what you're getting in this year's free agent market. And that is what's, I think, most appealing about Valdez, is that yes, you have to give up the qualifying offer, compensation, draft pick, and money, but you know exactly what you're getting, at least for the next couple of years. And the Mets need that kind of horse to help spearhead spearhead the front line of the rotation with one Noel McLean and everyone else in company. So Valdez, I've teetered a lot with my opinions on him, but he's still, in my opinion, would be one of the best acquisitions, if not the best the Mets can land, when evaluating solely the free agent market. Now, we don't have to just talk about Framber Valdez, everybody. We got more pitchers to talk about in this one. So let's go ahead and let's take away the Valdez stats and let's get on to our next topic in this one. And our next topic in this one is going to be the following, everybody. It is going to be, we're going to come back to Michael K at the end. That's going to be a fun one to get into to wrap up the show. Let's talk about Tarik Skubal. Let's have the Skubal conversation, because you guys may have clicked on this video for that reason, okay? Now, as many of you guys know, I love Tarik Skubal. Why? He's a back-to-back Cy Young Award winner in the American League. Gives you 200 innings a year, has a K per nine of 11 strikeouts per nine, a walk per nine of 1.5, 100 strikeouts on just his changeup alone this past year. He's amazing. At 2.2 ERA, 2.7 ERA, touches 98 to 100 on the gun consistently. He is as ace and as Cy Young as they come. He is literally all of that. Buster only states the following today, as of just a couple hours ago at the time of this video dropping. The Tigers continue to be engaged with other teams in discussing the Tarik Skubal trade options. Still unclear whether he will actually be moved or not. The asking prices are enormous, as you can imagine. He could be the biggest difference maker for a new team in 2026 in Detroit. Would be able to get significant value in return to do this. The Tigers can end the conversation at any point by announcing they're keeping him. But here's the thing, guys. We're entering winter meetings. There's no announcement as of now that's saying the Tigers are putting the foot down that they will not trade Skubal. Why? Because they would be idiotic to do so. The type of conversations that they are having with teams right now, I'm sure, are significant. Every contending team that has quality assets to give are in the Skubal market. But there is no team, and this is verbatim what has been stated from Jeff Passan, among many others of credibility in the industry since the start of the offseason. The Mets are the best positioned team this offseason to make a splash for Tarik Skubal, without a doubt about it. And when we talk more on Tarik, and when we talk about his just immediate upside, again, there's so much to Skubal that's appealing. And yes, I understand he's a rental, meaning that, of course, you can give up a haul for him, but there's no guarantee you're going to have him beyond the 2026 season. I understand that completely. But what I also understand is that Tarik Skubal is coming off of a roughly 7-WAR season where he himself accounted for 7 wins, just himself as a starter. There is no bigger needle mover at all that can help this rotation now, that can make this team go from good to great on the pitching front, than landing the back-to-back American League Cy Young Award winner. Yes, you of course would have to give up top pitching prospects. Yes, you of course would have to give up some top out infield talent. Yes, you'd have to give up a haul. But here's the thing, Skubal's upside is greater than any other starter we are going to talk about today, and that's not an understatement. And the Mets are really determined to make a splash that can define the rotation for years to come. You trade for Tarik Skubal, you offer him an extension worth of $400 million, and you get the Scott Boras client done. And to say, oh, there's no chance that Skubal will get extended. You really think there's no chance when Scott Boras has made more millions of dollars from Steve Cohen than any other owner in baseball since becoming owner entering the 2021 season? You're lying yourself if you don't think that, one, they already have a great rapport, but two, that's in the best interest of the Mets that they gave up a haul for Skubal, that they would do everything in their power to extend him before opening day. The Mets just did this with Francisco Lindor a couple years ago. Maybe you guys don't remember, but let me enlighten you. At the time, the Mets gave up a haul, and in hindsight, it was a great trade. Andres Jimenez was the key piece. Ahmad Rosario, when he still had upside. You had Josh Wolf that you traded. One other prospect that was in that group, it wasn't Justin Dunn, I don't think, it was someone else. But for everyone the Mets gave up, Lindor is the best player still in the end of that deal. And the Mets made sure that Lindor signed a $300+ million extension before playing a single game in a Mets uniform. How? They inked him on the final hour before midnight of opening day 2021. We covered it on the platform like it was yesterday. And the reason why I bring that up is you really don't think that is exactly the kind of route the Mets would go down if they gave up an abundance of assets for a rental player? You're fooling yourself if you think that the Mets would do everything in their power to trade for Skubal, yet comfortably let him walk after next season. Not a chance, pardon my French, in hell that would happen. So for Skubal, I don't need to sell you on how good he is. Just do the homework if you haven't already. If you've been following the platform, you already have all the homework. He is as elite as they get. And before I salivate more just on the thought of Tarik Skubal in a Mets uniform, you may say to yourself, all right, Wardy, here's the thing. as great as Skubal is, can the Mets do a better job this offseason by allocating those assets elsewhere, by spreading them more out, so that way they can land two really slam dunk pitchers instead of just one elite one? It's possible. I'm not going to say you're entirely wrong, but if the Mets are adamant on getting the best options out there, look no further than Tarik Skubal and then work your way down on the laundry list of all the other starter options. And you see how pretty those numbers are from Valdez, from Mr. Rainer Suarez, and again, they're really, really nice. There's not a whole lot to complain about when you look at Rainer Suarez's makeup, as you guys see from a Savant page. But when we compare and contrast this with Tarik Skubal, another southpaw, this is what you're getting. And this is why you want Tarik Skubal. Oh, okay. Service temporarily unavailable. I'll just go F myself. That's cool. Why did that happen? I wish I knew. All right, Baseball Savant, thank you for crashing on me last second, live in real time. First, my camera has to go to kaput, and now you have to be a factor? Really? We have to do this right now? Actually pathetic. Nonsense. I apologize, everybody. Let me pull this up for you. Hate when that stuff happens. This is what I love, though. Oh, my God. All I see is red in the best way possible, okay? And what he's not red in, he's still right around league average. What it's ground ball percentage, barrel percentage, and extension. So he doesn't get elite extension for a guy at 6'3", but that's fine. Changeup that he throws 31% of the arsenal, 88 miles per hour. Four seam, 29% of the arsenal, 98 miles per hour. Sinker, 24% of the arsenal, 97 miles per hour. Slider, 12% of the arsenal, 90 miles per hour. Curveball, 3% of the arsenal. Oh my God, 81 miles per hour. Give me Tarik Skubal. What? Oh my God, he's so good. He's so good. He's so good. All right, guys, let's go ahead from talking about Tarik Skubal. We just got a couple more and then we're out of here. Next up is not Skubal. Let's go up here. Let's talk about Tatsuya Imai. My dog, everybody. My dog. And in this report from Mark Feinstein of MLB, he states that the Mets and Yankees are reportedly amongst the most interested teams in both Tatsuya Imai and Michael Cain. And we're going to talk about Michael Cain after Imai here, so we'll do one and then the other. Starting with Imai, for those that don't know Tatsuya Imai, let me quickly fill you in. Dominant pitcher from the MPB this past season, had a sub-2 ERA in 163 innings. A lot of upside only entering his age 28 season, so even if you ink him on a 5 to 7 year contract, there's a lot of upside for him. It will be ending that contract and still not even, fully his mid-30s. It'll be a little bit before that for the most part. A sub .9 whip. We're looking at roughly 10 strikeouts per nine to 2.5 walks per nine. His walk rate has significantly gotten better every single year each of the past 5 years. Truly a fantastic job. He's just coming into his own when looking at how good he can be, and he's hitting the bigs right at the precipice of him becoming the best pitcher he's ever been in his career. It is prime time to land someone like Tatsuya Imai. And not only are the Mets among the most interested teams in his market, but there's a couple key factors here. One, Imai has made it abundantly clear he does not want to land with a team that already has a Japanese player. He wants to pave his own path and doesn't want a helping hand in doing so. Again, the Mets have over 50% chance, according to Jeff Passan and John Heyman, to trade Mr. Kodai Senga this offseason for the most part. So the likelihood is that he will, in fact, be traded. And I believe that was just Heyman. I don't think Passan actually had him in his latest article. Point stands. Imai makes a lot of sense. Touches 100 on the gun. Nasty, nasty, nasty work there when you're looking at the sink piece with the splitty. Of course, with that tight slider, that's been more part of his arsenal. He's had more success over the past year and a half, 2 years with. There's a lot to love about Tatsuya Imai. And as you guys can also see, regarding, let me just pull this up here, some of Imai's highlights from this past season. Again, he's a very intriguing pitcher for this Mets team, and I think Imai, truthfully, would be one of the best options for the Mets to go ahead and try to land if they can. And they've loved Imai from the start of the offseason. David Stearns actually scouted Imai, along with Munetaka Murakami and others, when he went back overseas in mid-August of this summer. So Imai, a lot to like about him, a lot of upside. Yes, there's uncertainty. Yes, he's not supposed to be as good as Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but he's a guy that should range from a 2 to a 4 in your rotation, depending on how quickly he adjusts to the major league level. But there's a reason why so many teams heavily covet a talent like Tatsuya Imai, and the fact that the Mets and the Yankees are both heavily involved in this market is good. I think the Yanks have an adamancy to finally land an MPB player because they really haven't done anything of significance on that front since guys like Masahiro Tanaka, for example, and they've swung and missed terribly in recent years in these markets. So Whether it's Tatsuya Imai, Kazuma Akamoto, to lesser degree Munetaka Murakami, the jury's still out as to what the Yankees will do there, but they are involved currently. So that is something to make a note of. The Mets, though, have always loved Tatsuya Imai. I love him, too. I think he'd be a slam dunk fit in this rotation. If you sign Imai and you trade for an ace caliber starter, I am amped heading in next season. Because like I said, I think Imai has some of the most intriguing upside out of the starters available right now, given his uncertainty, yes, but also because of how greatly he's adjusted each of the past 2 years in the MPB. Like, he's really found his game in a way that he hadn't previously pitched in Japan, and I think the Mets have a great opportunity to maximize his potential on a multi-year contract. Now, whether or not it'll happen is yet to be seen, but point stands, Mets love Tatsuya Imai, and for great reason. Now, to go on from Tatsuya Imai, everybody, because we talked about him extensively on the platform, final thing I'll make note in regards to him is that he is actually planning to be touring a lot of facilities, and including teams on the East Coast. You know, there's an increased belief right now that Tatsuya Imai has the appetite to potentially land with a big market team on the East Coast. So whether that's the Yankees, whether that's the Mets, whether that's the Phillies, whether that is the Red Sox to a degree, the point stands, there is a stronger likelihood than not that he will land on the East Coast with a team going a similar Kodai Senga type route, which is encouraging. But again, you got to trade Senga in order to make room for him and actually to land him because of what I stated about his preference. Michael Cain, this is one we talked about briefly in the platform, but now we really are going to have more of an extended conversation. The Mets have liked Michael Cain for a bit from everything that I know, but the reporting that came out today reaffirms this. There are two clear factors as to why Michael Cain is not as feasible as a starter option for the Mets than maybe some others we talked about today. Is A, his lack of health. Michael Cain missed a good chunk of last year due to injury, came back, was a little wishy-washy, and then got in a groove. There's a lot to like about Michael Cain, a former top Yankee reliever that turned starter, blossomed. Carlos Mendoza knows him well during their time in the Yankees organization together. Clay Holmes knows him very well, and it would be fitting if the Mets had Michael Cain and Clay Holmes, two relievers turned starters formerly of the Yankees organization, now with the Mets. Cain has ace caliber upside when he is right. In 2024, he dominated to a 30-start season, jaw-droppingly good, as one of the better starters in all of the National League. The problem with Michael Cain, though, is A, his lack of consistent innings that we have seen over the past couple years. It's not just 73 that you guys can see there. It's 173 in his full season with the Padres. That was the breakout. But before that, his final year as a reliever turned starter with the Yankees, where he only had 9 starts, 104 innings. He had a tremendous 2.75 ERA and a 3.48 expected ERA. Since then, leaves a bit to be desired when looking on the consistency of innings. So for Michael Cain, he is not nearly as much of a certainty in what you're getting. And that is what I'm sure can deter a team like the New York Mets here. The Mets are prioritizing solely innings and quality pitching. They're not going to land Michael Cain. But if they land an ace caliber starter that has the innings, they may have more of an interest to take the risk with someone like Michael Cain on a Shamania structured contract around 3 years, $75+ million to try to get the best out of him. Otherwise, Michael Cain might be better suited elsewhere for a team that already has a very established rotation that's just looking to bolster and add to the upside that Michael Cain would bring for them. I like Cain a lot. He's handled the New York market very well. He's handled these big markets well at a young age. I think he'd do really well with who the Mets currently have in staff for their pitching department, as well as the guys that we actually have in the organization. But whether or not the Mets actually go ahead and land Michael Cain has yet to be seen. But do I think a Michael Cain signing is potentially more feasible than, say, a Tatsuya Imai if the Mets trade for ace caliber starter? I do, because I don't know how much of an appetite the Mets have to go long-term for a starter in the free agent market, the way that Michael Cain is going to be more of that midterm range of 3-4 years tops. Maybe even a little less. Maybe you could get him on a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year option. Not entirely sure. But what I am sure of is that Michael Cain has his upside, has ace caliber stuff when he is right. And as you guys can see from Michael Cain's Baseball Savant page, not a lot to love from 2025, but again, he dealt with injuries. So there's a big asterisk with this. Let's talk more solely on 2024. And in 2024, these numbers are pretty. Again, 99th percentile in average exit velocity. So when he's right, no one was hitting him at all. And as I'm talking about this, everybody, the Mets just acquired a lower level pitcher off of the Red Sox, that being in Cooper Criswell, who in fact, has, nothing crazy. I'm going to actually talk about him, everybody. And this is a guy that will more than likely impact the Mets bullpen. So actually a solid pickup for the Mets I'm seeing off the waiver claim, because the Red Sox just made a big trade for Oviedo and a bunch of other pitchers recently from the Pirates yesterday. So they're trying to make some roster room. So we'll talk more about that before we get out of here. But Michael Cain has his upside. Not a guy that throws overly hard, but certainly someone that the Mets still are clearly coveting and might actually have more interest in him than what we initially thought this offseason. So we're almost done here, everybody. Bear with me, because like I said, a lot of topics to break down in this one, but I want to make sure that we hit on everything here. Not only did we talk about those, we talked about Imai here, and this was a quote again from Jeff Passan talking more. Tatsuya Imai could wind up with a big market team on the East Coast. The Yankees with Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon. The New York Mets, Philadelphia Phillies are reasonable landing spots as well. So now to go down here, everybody, just to make sure that I do not miss anything on this one, we have, of course, the Devin Williams presser today around 3:30 Eastern. That's dropping. We'll talk more about that and content later today. If we drop another video and or live stream, be on the lookout for it. But this is the final thing. I'm not going to play the audio here because I don't feel like listening to his voice. It just drives me up a wall. But not Michael Cain, Michael K, something I finally agree with him on, because he's talking about the Yankees, something he knows, and not Juan Soto, who has been in the organization for over a year, like the schmuck that he can be. Point stands. Schmuck that being Michael. He states here on ESPN over the past day that the Yankees, there's a firm belief that they don't want to go to the $300 million tax threshold. They're currently at like 279 right now. So if that holds true, they're not going to land Cody Bellinger. They're not going to land Kyle Tucker. They're probably not going to land Tatsuya Imai unless they would say trade a contract like a Carlos Rodon. So unless a Rodon gets traded, the Yankees are kind of pigeonholed as to really how far they're going to go this offseason. And this is a lot of Yankees fans' concern. I love every single second about it, because that's what you want to hear from a crosstown rival fan point of view. But the point stands. The Yankees might just not have as much of an appetite to spend this offseason as you initially thought, which means in order for them to upgrade, they'll have to try to maximize the trade market. You look at, will they be considering trading Spencer Jones, trading Jason Dominguez, among others, trading Anthony Volpe? How creative are the Yankees going to get this offseason with Cashman? We'll just have to wait and see. But it does not appear as of now that they're going to be as big of spenders as maybe what some of you guys initially thought entering the offseason. Now, the final thing that I wanted to make note of is, again, the latest pickup for the New York Mets, as I mentioned, as the Mets have picked up here, that being Cooper Criswell off waivers from the Red Sox. Criswell made 7 appearances for the Red Sox last season and started 18 games for Boston in 2024. He had a 4 ERA and 33 appearances with the Red Sox over the past 2 seasons. This strikes me heavily as a kind of rubber arm type, a guy that if you had to throw in there in a pinch for a start, maybe due to a bunch of injuries, you could do that. That would be an upgrade over a Brandon Waddell and others, and a guy who could be an option for you more on the lower leverage end that could eat a couple innings out of the Mets bullpen. So Cooper Criswell, welcome to the New York Mets. Let's see how much of a role, if at all, he will have for the Mets next season, or if the Mets will part ways with him before we even get to spring training, because, of course, they have to continue their roster crunch with the moves they are going to inevitably continue to make. So, point stands, everybody. We had a lot to talk about in this one. I hope you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for hitting that like and subscribe button on your way in and on your way out. Let me know all your thoughts and reactions to the following topics that we broke down in this one. Be on the lookout in case we do have more video and or live stream content that drops this evening. That means either A, breaking news has happened that the Mets have signed and or traded for quality players, or B, that a lot of more rumblings is coming out that we have to discuss on the platform, that we will do so as soon as humanly possible. Thank you guys again. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. And until next time, have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out.